Hello and welcome to the Ken Talks Film Podcast spoiler review for Passengers. No, wait, that's not right. Oh yeah, Rogue One. So to set the scene up, if you're not already aware of what this film is about and where it's set in the immediate lead up to the original Star Wars film, episode number 4, A New Hope, as it was retitled. Rogue One focuses on the Rebel Alliance learning about the existence of the Death Star and a subsequent hunt to steal the plans for it in the hope that they may be able to find its weakness and destroy it. I've seen this movie twice now. I've seen it both in digital and at the IMAX in the 70mm. There is quite a difference in the movie, the style and the tone of it, in terms of the look and feel of it in those two different formats. I'll go into that a little bit in detail. But this is my full spoiler review, so I'll be going into some of the details of the plot and the characters, my thoughts and opinions of it, and the alternate ending of the film, which is, on a cutting room floor somewhere. I'm going to delve into some of those scenes and some of those possibilities towards the end. So the film opens up with a Mads Mikkelsen, who you may have seen from TV shows Hannibal. He was also in Bond Casino Royale, and he's portraying Galen Erso. He is a person who's worked on the Death Star, worked for the Empire, but also seems to be on the Rebel Alliance side. And he's trying to protect his family from the Eastern Orson Kenrick, who's played by Ben Mendelsohn. For me, Mendelsohn is brilliant in this movie. He delivers a character as you would expect. I think he's a great actor overall. I really loved him in the Netflix series Bloodline. He eats up the screen, and his delivery is fantastic. He is the over-the-top, spitting, angry, fire, this is my creation type of line delivery in this film that you'd expect. However, he doesn't actually progress the story too far forward, which is a little disappointing for the character. But overall, I thought he played him well, and he fits into the Empire and that villainous team that we would expect from this type of movie. So for one of the shots in the opening scene, we're seeing in the Erso family home, we see a bottle of blue milk, a little bit of a nod to the original there as well. One of the odd scenes near the beginning, which I found slightly odd, was the Death Trooper picking up a Stormtrooper doll, which we presume is one of the toys of Jin, the little girl, and it's kind of an odd thing to see. I don't think we've seen Star Wars toys in the Star Wars universe, so maybe could be corrected there, but it seemed a little bit odd to me. And so obviously we follow the young Jyn Erso, the daughter. She's running away from Kenrick and the Death Troopers and hides away. We're then introduced to Forest Whitaker's characters of Saw Gerrera, who discovers her as part of this escape plan, and obviously he takes her and becomes that surrogate father figure to her. Now, Saw Gerrera, I was surprised his character was as little in this movie as I thought he would be, based on some of the trailers which we saw beforehand, but I'll go into some of the reasons why that is a little bit later on when we talk about alternate endings and different cuts. The movie opens directly with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and then cuts straight into the first image. There is no opening crawl in this movie. Is that an issue for me? No, I think it was a nice way to start the film slightly differently than the actual episodes. It gives it a slightly different feel, and it takes it away from being in that sync of, like I say, the episodes, and it's trying to make it more of its own identity. Also, the key thing to factor in here is that the first opening scene, in relative spec, is a flashback. So we're starting 15 years prior to where the main storyline takes place. So to have an opening crawl with that wouldn't have made much sense, because normally an opening crawl would establish the time period, the characters, and what essentially is going on. And I think potentially the downside to not having the opening crawl, as the first 20 minutes of the film become a little disjointed because you don't have that setup of the opening crawl. So then we get the title on the screen. There is no Star Wars fanfare. It is purely Rogue One. Doesn't even mention Star Wars or a Star Wars story in the actual title or logo on the screen, which I found quite interesting, because obviously it's part of all the merchandising material has gone on. But I suppose they're figuring, well, it's Star Wars, you're in the seat, so do we really need to explain it on the screen? But not having it there maybe took away some little bit of that nostalgia that kind of feel that, yeah, this is a Star Wars movie. You know, without having that Star Wars and the theme at least, it maybe feel a little bit, and there was something missing going into the beginning of the movie. So we jump 15 years ahead from that opening scene, and we're introduced to the adult version of Jyn Erso, who's played by Felicity Jones, who I think does a great job in this movie. And it's nice to see another female protagonist character, you know, driving the story of this when we've dealt with the Skywalkers for so long, who basically, their family issues causes problems throughout the galaxy, let's be honest. So now she's an adult with prison, clearly troubled by the fact that, you know, she has no parents, adoptive father, you know, very Jerry Kyle stuff. So like I said, the first 20 minutes seem a little uneven. It struggles with pace. Because we were being introduced to all these new characters, we jump from world to world, trying to get a bit of a backstory about where they are in the Star Wars universe. Now, one hand, it's nice to see all these different worlds, and it's probably the most worlds that we've experienced in a single Star Wars movie. The fact that we go to so many different places throughout, but it does feel a little bit like you're being pinged around from point to point, and it feels a little bit disjointed. And it's not until they really get to Jakku that the things start to settle. We then meet Diego Luna's character, Cassian Andor, and we believe him to be the good guy, part of the rebels, who's being told about this weapon that's being created by the Empire. However, you know, he literally shoots a guy in the back within the first 2 minutes of him being on screen. So you're a little bit like, well, is he a good character? Is he this kind of guy who just takes orders? Or is he just out to save himself a little bit? So you're a little bit unsure about the character to start with. It was quite a strange way to introduce him. One of my criticisms about this movie is we actually don't get to learn much about the characters themselves, where they've come from and why they're doing what they're doing. Most of the characters introduce themselves either by, hi, my name is, or they're introduced by another person saying, oh, this is Cassian. He is one of our, fighters. He's going to do X, Y, and Z. But that's all we kind of get on the characters. And it is a little bit disappointing, especially if you consider the characters like Chirrut, who plays by Donnie Yen, and Baze, who's played by Wen Zhang. We don't really get to know anything about them other than the Donnie Yen character, Chirrut, protecting the Jedi Temple. And that's it. So there is some scenes again in some of the earlier trailers which explain why they do what they do, but again, they're missing from this movie. We then have the rescue of Jyn, which sets up the main storyline with the rescue, or well, the rebels would prefer the death of Galen Erso because he's so integral to the Empire's plans. And we're then introduced to K2SO. Now, this is a fantastic character, one of my favorites from the movie. It's voiced by Alan Tudyk. I hope that's pronounced right, Tudyk. And he provides most of the humor in this movie. His one-lines are brilliantly delivered. And for me personally, he's probably my favorite droid of all the Star Wars movies. You could, don't shoot, don't hate. But R2-D2 potentially was one before. Didn't really have any lines. It's more about the character, his movements. BB-8 in a very similar way. This is an android who actually interacts with the characters and really delivers some great lines. So I really, really enjoyed this character. Okay, so this brings us on to, and I remember I said spoilers, Grand Moff Tarkin. Now, this is a bit of a debatable character in the movie since it came out. Now, while I was watching it, for me, first of all, I thought the character was first beautifully introduced. You kind of see the back of the character, and you see that hint of a reflection in the glass. You know who that character is, and it's like, oh, that's really awesome in this movie. But then you have the character turn around, and you get this full image of the character, which I was not expecting in this movie. I had no idea he was in this movie. Now, to its credit, the motion capture in this film is very, very good. It can't really be flawed from that point of view. I think there is a difference between the digital version and the IMAX version in 70mm. The 70mm gives it that grain and takes away some of that disbelief for the CGI character. However, as good as the CGI is, when you're watching the movie, you know you're watching a CGI character. And it takes you out of the movie a little bit and is a little bit of a distraction because you're so focused on that CGI character. You're almost looking for the flaws. And I can see why they've done it. in terms of introducing that character, because he was very vital in that period of the Star Wars franchise and in those movies in that time period. But I was so surprised how much they use that character through the movie. I thought potentially, okay, there's one scene and done, but you know, he keeps coming back throughout the movie. And the more you watch the film, the less you get taken out of it, because, you know, you come to accept that's what it is. It's from a story basis. I'm not going to go into the discussion of the ethics behind bringing a character played by an actor who is dead. I think that's very touch and go. But for me personally, I think they did it with, you know, great taste and a good homage to the actor and the character. And for me, it didn't feel disrespectful. Now, like I said, we expect a lot more of Tarkin in this movie than, you know, we probably should have had. For me personally, I would have liked to have seen more of Vader in those particular scenes. Vader could have driven those storylines and discussions with Kenrick. However, you know, it is what it is. And like I said, on the second viewing, I wasn't taking it as out as much as the first, but I think that was a lot of help by the 70mm presentation. So things start to settle as we get into Jedha, and the pace evens out for the second act. We see the guys in the bar from episode number 4, which was quite a nice throwback. However, you know, I couldn't help but feeling when he's bumping into the character, you're kind of, dude, you're so going to lose your arm. So it was kind of a nice little plug into the original trilogy movies there. And we've kind of got that set up with a couple of major characters, but then we're delivered into the next couple, which is the Donnie Yen character, Shrewd, and Baze, played by Wen Zhang. Now, two fabulous characters. I wish we got to see more and find out a little bit more about them. But that Donnie Yen scene where he's taking out all the stormtroopers was fantastic. Apparently Donnie Yen worked on providing new martial arts technique for that. And you know, it really delivers on screen. It's really, really nice to see. He is a character that links you to the Star Wars Force element, without being a Force wielder, which is really nice. So he is someone who believes in the Force. He protected the Jedi Temple. I am one with the Force is with me. I am one with the Force is with me. It's, you know, really great delivery. I think Donnie Yen, is really nice to see him in, you know, this kind of big budget role, and, you know, deal with the character, which is, you know, that thought-provoking and, you know, almost the words of wisdom, potentially throughout the movie when the group is together. Also, Donnie Yen's character really delivers in probably the funniest line of the movie, when the team is captured by Saw Gerrera's team, and they put the hoods on everybody. Obviously, it goes on to his head as well, and he's like, "Are you kidding me? I'm blind." That probably got the most laughs of the whole entire movie, that one particular line from him. Absolutely brilliant. We then meet the pilot, Brody Rook, who's played by Riz Ahmed. We know probably least about this character of all the other ones. He's defected from the Empire to bring Saw Gerrera the message from Galen Erso. But we don't really know why he's doing it, why he's had this change of heart. Unlike where we had sort of like Finn in Star Wars Episode 7, you kind of get a real understanding of why he's deflected away, why he can no longer be a stormtrooper. This guy is just like, oh, you know, Erso told me I could be better. And that was kind of it. So it's really disappointing from that character development. Like I said, some of the other characters really suffer from that in this movie. I understand these are all new characters. We don't have any history on them at all. So to build a backstory to all of them would have made it quite tricky. But there's a scene in this movie that seems so out of place that they introduce this character who's a mind-reading tentacle monster. And he molests Brody to find out what he's thinking, because Saw Gerrera wants to know if he's lying or not. And that seems to me like an excellent opportunity for when he goes to his head, mind reading him, to get a bit of a backstory to him. You could have had some flashes of images, some things he's done, things he's seen, but we didn't get any of that. And it was such a weird scene to have in the movie, and it felt really out of place for me, and didn't really lead anything to the story, because Saw Gerrera still kind of didn't believe him, even though he's read his mind. So very strange scene. We then get the destruction of Jedha and the escape, and for me this was very well done. The Death Star, what we've seen previously, is this huge destructive planet or moon-sized object which can destroy planets, and you kind of get detached a little bit because you just see this huge explosion of this planet. This destruction was so small and large on the scale at the same time, that you really felt the power of the Death Star here. You know, I think the CGI here was fantastic. The way the city comes up in the middle, like, you know, an atom bomb, and is just like expanding further and further out, the rubble turning over. I thought this was so well done, and one of my favorite parts of the opening 2 acts. And this brings us pretty much where the band of rebels, or the Rogue One team, come together. So we get all our characters at this point. And the movie, you know, like I say, is a decent second act. First one's a little bit ropey, but it's all about the third act. And it's more in this second act where, for me, the best thing about this film is really revealed and introduced. So one of the historic things about Star Wars that people who are Star Wars fans and non-Star Wars fans pick up on is the destruction of the Death Star. You know, why would the Empire build this machine that was capable of ruling the galaxy and destroying planets with such an obvious and easy get-out clause for the opposition? Reason being is it's perfectly described in this film. Galen Erso is part of the Empire team. He then doesn't believe in what he's doing anymore and flees. And obviously that opening scene is where Kenrick is trying to bring him back because they feel they need his help because the introduction and the production of the Death Star stalled. And he's forced to do it because he knows otherwise they'll find his daughter. But he's also forced to do it because when he gets there, he realizes that actually they don't really need me to complete this Death Star. They're going to do this with or without me. So he makes himself feel that he's indispensable. So they have to keep him around, that he's integral to the part, which then allows him to implement his plan and a trap, which is to make a vulnerability in the Death Star. And this is where he leaves a message for Jyn to try and help, go get the plans, get them to the rebels so they know how to defeat the Death Star. Now, for me, this is great story writing into the bigger, wider world, and it really brings in the... As much as this is an anthology film and a spin-off, it really brings it home into the original trilogy, especially directly into A New Hope. And it literally lays the groundwork for all the Star Wars movies that follow it, because they're all based around that Death Star. So the fact that, you know, this is such an integral story to the wider story arc of the saga, this was the best feature and thing for me from the movie. So we've spoken about him a little bit. Now let's get to the point to... Let's talk Vader. It was wonderful to see the character on screen again. The introduction for me for the character in the movie, you first see him obviously in the tank, and you get to see that almost vulnerability. You realize his age and stature of where he is in this time period. The fact that he's missing those arms, you know, from episode number 3, and then you get this beautifully shot scene where Kenrick is in the sort of like this big room waiting for him, and the doors open up. You get this huge shadow of him and the helmet basically looming over Kendrick, you know, shows the imposing power, and he walks out to his theme tune, and it was so great to see. Chews the screen up with Kendrick there for a little bit, but then he delivers the Vader line of the movie, where it's "Don't choke on your aspirations, director." Absolutely brilliant. It's such a Vader line, kind of gives you chills, you know, the way he's force choking him. Absolutely brilliant. Like I said, we wish we got more Vader in the movie. He does have a scene at the end, which I'll touch on a little bit further, but can you imagine Vader on the beach in that battle with the rebels at the end of the movie? That would have been something to see. So Jyn cannot convince the Alliance to go with her, or for her to lead the team into Scarif to find the Death Star plans, which her father has laid there. And so therefore she gets together a band of rebels, rebels within the rebels, if you will. Now this leads us into the excellent third and best act of the movie. The Rogue One team, as they are now called, start making great progress in Scarif, and obviously this gets fed back to the Alliance team, and they're all like, oh, well, geez, you know, if they're doing so well, maybe we should show up and help. Yeah, that would have helped to start with. But from a story perspective, obviously we can't have that. We need the heroes team to be small and compact, and the underdogs, and we know they are up against the might of the Empire. If you had the whole Alliance team rock up right at the beginning of the battle, it would have seemed really uneven. It was like, oh, okay, it's just face off. So obviously from a story point of view, the way they have to turn against her to come back to aid her is very cliche, but it's Star Wars. Now, what's really nice to see in the third act in the space battle, some of the original and stock footage from episode number 4 of the fighter pilots and X-Wing pilots. They merged this in quite well, so you get some of those same characters from A New Hope. I thought this was a really nice touch, and again, some really nice links. I think potentially the only thing that was here, which would have been really nice, is to get more Porkins. Can you imagine seeing him on the screen and getting some more screen time with him? Maybe it's a little bit too obvious and on the nose and maybe too much of a fan service, but it's something I would have really liked to have seen. Now, for me, going into this movie, obviously I was aware of the story, and unfortunately, Rogue One already has a sequel in episode number 4. But what I wasn't expecting was how the characters would eventually reside in the universe, which is they all die. I was really surprised by this. The first one that went was K2. I was kind of bummed out. You know, he sacrificed himself, but you could understand why. And, you know, again, it was an android, but you're thinking, oh, well, you know, if they collect the body, they'll be able to take his programming. And, you know, we've seen C-3PO being dismantled before, and, you know, it'll be fine. It's not until we get to the Donnie Yen character, I am one with the Force is with me, I am one with the Force is with me, I am one with the Force is with me. And Baze, when those two characters are killed off, you start thinking, damn, people aren't leaving this. People aren't getting out of here. You know, you say people gonna die, it happens, right? So that is when you start to get a realization of everything that's happening. Now, what happens then is obviously the plans get sent up to spaceship they receive. The Death Star sends down a laser and blows up Scarif, and all the characters are taken away in a blaze. In some ways, it was an unsatisfying ending to those characters, but because we didn't know too much of their history, you didn't feel that you cared that much. So, you know, that what happens is like, oh, you know, the bad guys, you know, they've sacrificed themselves, and, you know, I understand that it's for the greater good, and, you know, good for them. Then you have that very special moment at the end of the film, pitch black, saber comes on, the breathing, Vader has his moment. And you've gone from wanting the rebels to win and get the plans that succeed to wanting Vader to kill the rebel scum. It was incredible. The way you shift your alliance in the movie for this character that you love, who's the bad guy, ripping into people, Force throwing them up in the air, taking them out with a lightsaber, plunging one through a person and through the door. Epic moment in that movie. Absolutely delivered. You just wanted more. You really wanted more coming away from that. It's like, I've just had, you just kind of got me right on the edge, and now you snapped it away from me. I'm really hoping that the reason we haven't seen more Vader in this movie is they're going to be saving him for a spin-off. I believe within the timeline and the anthology movies they're doing, they definitely have scope for this. I really feel there's an opportunity between episode 5 and episode 6 where you have a big time gap that they could do a spin-off. During that period, Luke is going off to learn and finish off his Force and Jedi training. You could have a spin-off with Darth Vader searching the galaxy for Luke, trying to find him, taking out all these Rebel and Alliance people, you know, one by one or in groups or in huge battles. I think there's a real opportunity there because, again, he's still at the peak of his powers at this point. So I'm really hoping that we didn't see as much Vader in here because we're going to get a lot more of him, and it was more of a tease for that anticipation of something else coming. So overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought director Gareth Edwards, did a really good job on this. It does look beautiful, especially in that 70mm in the IMAX production. His work is a lot more grounded in this. It really brings the war in Star Wars in terms of that ground battle, which we haven't had too much before. It's mainly been up in space. We had a little bit on Hoth and stuff like that. I thought his camera work was fantastic. Very much in tone with the originals. You know, JJ obviously has his own style, especially in those spaceship battles. You have sort of like the wide panning shot zooming in slightly. Didn't get any of that in this movie, and I kind of liked it better for that. He takes us through several brilliant locations and new worlds that we haven't been to before. Scarif, again, you know, this outstanding final third act with the Stormtroopers versus Rebel action pieces, Death Troopers and stuff like that. You know, really, really well done. I think overall the CGI in this movie was spot on. I think, again, the destruction of Jeddah and the ship's fighting scenes, the space battle were fantastic. I think in the digital production, one of the scenes that took me out of it a little bit was when you get the reveal of the one of the ships, and then you get the reveal of the Death Star as it's being finished in production with the big satellite part going in. it almost looked too fake. It was very model-like. But again, when you're watching it in that 70mm version, that grain and edge just takes it away, and you really get that feel for the original prosthetic. So like I say, the aesthetics of this movie are fantastic as well. You know, lots of handmade stuff, puppets, real props. You know, I think that really delivered in terms of the sense and the feel of the original trilogy, which obviously this is set before. Now, if you didn't know, the score for this movie was actually only recorded in just over 4 weeks. It was done by the composer Michael Giacchio, and he replaced Alexandre Desplat, who, what we were told, was removed from the project basically due to some reshoot conflicts, and he couldn't therefore do the music and the score based on all these reshoots that were done. Now, Giacchio has done some great work. He's recently done Doctor Strange, he's done Star Trek, Planet of the Apes, Jurassic World. He's already signed on to do Jurassic World 2. He's doing Spider-Man Homecoming, and he's also doing Pixar's Incredibles 2. So he's really, really big in the industry. Some big shoes to fill with John Williams. John Williams has done all the previous installments of the Star Wars, including episode number 7. And you know what? It wasn't a bad effort. I feel that he hit most of the right tones and notes, pun intended, for the movie, but it didn't have a memorable theme. Most movies you've come out of, you know, you've obviously got the Star Wars theme, you've got the Vader theme, you've got the themes from episode 1, Duel of Fates and stuff like that. You've even got the Rey theme from episode number 7, and most of those you can come out humming something. You don't come out of this movie thinking, what was that tune? What was that sound? You appreciate it at the time because it's just nice and it fits. There's some nice subtle tones of the original soundtrack. The only time you actually get to hear the main Star Wars theme is during part of the credits. So for me, that was a little bit disappointing. I would have liked to have heard it in some part of the movie where it's a climatic battle, or even, you know, right at the beginning of those end credits. But yeah, so it was good, but not memorable. So now I'm going to discuss the alternative ending and alternative version of Rogue One. Now, I discussed on some previous podcasts with my friends about the reshoots that were taking place on this movie, and all movies these days have reshoots. Every single feature film will go through some reshoots at some point, pick up some scenes, redo some dialogue, whatever it may be. However, I believe this movie has gone through extensive reshoots that I wasn't expecting. The reason why you can see most of this is you can see the story has changed a lot as well. I'm going to start off with the very first teaser trailer that we got back in April. Now, we see a very different Jyn Erso in this trailer. Her character seems to have gone through a process of where they've kind of changed. In the original one, she seems that very generic, reluctant hero, a bit snarky, a little bit like Han Solo, you know, I don't really want to be here. And, you know, she's forced to wear handcuffs when talking to Mon Mothma on Yavin 4, which was a nice throwback as well, by the way, because most of her scenes were cut out of episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, but they brought the same actress back who hasn't aged a day and managed to deliver those scenes. And she comes across as really disinterested in the anti-imperial cause. You have the voiceover in the original teaser trailer where Mon Mothma actually says, from the age of 15, on your own from the age of 15, reckless, aggressive, undisciplined. And Jin's cut line for the movie is, "This is a rebellion, isn't it? I rebel." Now, I'm kind of glad they took that line out of the movie because it is kind of cheesy, but that wasn't in the final cut of the film at all, any of those lines. It seems that she was a lot more sympathetic and a lot more like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll help in the actual movie, as opposed to being this very dismissive and I don't really want to be here. We also had the adoptive father of her, Saw Gerrera, mainly as a voiceover in the teaser trailer, but it cuts to him with a shaved head. Now, most of this movie, you'll see him with the grey hair, but he has a shaved head at the start of the film when he's rescuing the young Jyn. There's a voiceover in the original teaser trailer from Gerrera where he's like, "What would they do when they catch you? What would they do when you break you? If you continue to fight, what will you become?" And it cuts to him in that younger version. Now, that isn't in the movie at all. So for me, there seems to be a scene missing where Gerrera is talking to potentially a young Jyn before she goes off. You know, maybe she was in her mid-teens, or maybe, you know, there's something missing there. or whether when they've reshot, they've added the hair to him later, is very, very strange. And I think Saw Gerrera, there's a lot more of him on the cutting room floor than there is in this movie. Very, very strange indeed. You also see the running on the beach towards the end of that trailer and heading towards the AT-ACT walker, and the walker shooting down like into the camera frame shot. I can't believe that was done specifically for the trailer. Again, that shot is not in the movie, and for me that was a really impressive shot. So that was really disappointing. Then we move on to the second trailer, and again it starts with a Saw Gerrera speech. Again, this is changed from the film, and those lines that are starting that trailer are not in it. It's very, very strange. We also have General Dravin and Yaren 4 in the base when they're first talking to Jin, and he says, "Can you be trusted without your shackles?" Again, this isn't part of the movie. So again, it's a very different Jin. You know, she was very much, seemed like almost like a threat, and they were scared of her in the first trailers. With this one, they seem to be a lot more overpowering of her, and she's a lot more submissive in terms of them, how she can help them. We then see a shot of Jin in the cockpit with Cassian, where they're exchanging. Good. Not in the film. KSO approaches Jin on screen in Jakub after they seem to have that initial first confrontation with the stormtroopers, where he does come in, delivers a great line where he's like, "Did you know it wasn't me you're shooting?" And he says, "The captain says you are a friend. I will not kill you." That line isn't in the movie either. You know, so again, so much footage missing. There's another scene in the trailer where K2's on the ship, and he says, "There is a 97.6% chance of failure." And Cassian replies, "He means well," to the crew there. Again, missing from the movie. We have a completely different ending to this movie. That is where most of the reshoots must have taken place. In that second trailer, we have the scene where Jin is up on the tower and she has to realign the satellite to send the Death Star plans out. Now, as she's going across that bridge, there's this huge TIE fighter that comes up to face her as she's kind of walking down holding her pistol. That is completely removed from the movie. That isn't in there at all. And I don't understand why. You know, could it have been Vader in that TIE fighter? Could it, you know, why was that taken out? Why was the ending so drastically changed? You know, could have there been a confrontation on the bridge where the satellite actually gets destroyed, and actually Jin and Cassian, they actually end up escaping via a ship? There's plenty of ships on that planet. They could have gotten out. So again, it was very, very strange, and I think there's a big difference. The other thing that we have to take away from it, again with the reshoots, is the Celebration sizzle reel. Now, the Star Wars Celebration sizzle reel, Jin and the crew spend far more time on the beach, as what the first trailer suggests. We see her running on the beach with Cassian and the plans of the Death Star in her hand. Now, this never happens in the final cut of the movie. There's quite a bit of a slow-mo where she's running down, plans, Cassian behind her, explosions going around, soldiers, and that also leads to a shot of her and Cassian running through the beach water with the Alliance rebels as well. Again, this isn't in the movie. Completely different. She never actually gets onto the beach. They go straight into the Scarif buildings to get the plans, and they reach to the top. It's only at the end where they end up on the beach before they get taken out by the laser. So again, a very, very different battle. I think there's a lot more battle scenes that we didn't get in this movie. We also get the shots at the end where Jin is in the ship and she says, "May the force be with us." That line is in the movie, but it's a completely different location. It's in a ship as they're leaving Yaren 4, but this seems to be in a different ship. She's standing differently, and it seems like potentially they've just got onto the beach and they're about to go out and start fighting. Or maybe that was the beginning of their escape. So again, lots of stuff missing. Now, will we ever get to see this different cut, all these different scenes? We'll wait to see if they arrive on the Blu-ray. But I feel there's a bigger movie out there and a different kind of movie. And it'd be interesting to see whether this was Gareth Edwards' decision to do it, or whether it was just Disney and execs stepping in, and they brought in somebody else, who's just Tony Gilroy, in to do a lot of that work. So, you know, Gareth Edwards hasn't, kicked up a fuss about it. He hasn't really spoken and come out and said, this isn't my movie, unlike something like with Fantastic Four and the way that production and the director went. But it does, stand to believe, is Disney maybe interfering too much in the story in the film? Or was this a collective decision? They decided, this wasn't the way to go with the movie, and so therefore we got the ending that we got. So, Star Wars Rogue One, for me, a good movie, a solid movie, a welcome addition to the franchise. really delivers on some of those storyline aspects which were missing, plugs some of those holes. Couple of great characters, but not a great movie. I think there was some missed opportunities. I would have liked to have seen more Vader. I would like to see more depth in the characters, and for me that was the one thing that was really lacking in this movie, wanting to care for these characters. You know, whether we'll get a Donnie Yen spin-off movie, which would be amazing. You know, there are possibilities for that. For me, as an 8 out of 10, like I said, potentially watching it on that 70mm projection at the IMAX, you know, maybe drove it up to an 8.5 because of the look and feel with it. It was very different from the digital. You know, you even getting those specks of dirt on the screen, which are filtered out through the filters every now and then. You know, it really was a nice throwback. But, you know, if this is the way that the anthology films are going to go, I think, you know, we can feel a little bit relieved we're in safe hands. The next one is going to be young Han Solo, and we're going to have a young Lando Calrissian and stuff in that as well. So it's going to be set in a completely different time period. So again, all new characters, but with some of those familiarity. Well, I doubt we're going to have the crawl again. We're going to know these characters and going to be introducing some others around it. So we'll wait to see what kind of cameos and special appearances we get with that. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the spoiler review and talking about some of those aspects of the cut film and the alternative version. You can find me, as always, on Twitter at Ken Talks Film, or on Facebook.com/Ken Talks Film. Information is on your screen below. Please, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like the video, as YouTube are really taking note of those likes now. And please tune in for the next episode of Ken Talks Film for the regular podcast. Thanks for watching.